panelists, and I will ask them to come up one after one. I will have a little one-on-one with each one of them, and then we will be addressing questions as a panel as well. I would like first to invite on the stage Professor Dong-Il Chung, who's from the School of Management at Yonsei University, Korea. Dong-Il will be talking about the banking and finance industry in Asia, and in particular we will focus on Korea. And what is sort of interesting to me is that Korea has had spectacular success in several sectors recently, exemplified of course by consumer electronics, but also for example by the entertainment business recently, and other sectors as well, cosmetic business. But in banking, there isn't really any major player in Asia even, right? Is that a fair summary?
I think it's fair to say that.
And why is that?
Part of the reason would be the lack of experience. Korean banking industry has been focusing mainly on the domestic market, and there are a lot of high potential employees who are looking at the global marketplace for their expansion. Korean financial service market has been protected by Korean government as well, so they don't have the big need to go out and make money outside of Korea. And Korean financial market has been relatively stable and big, so I guess that also demotivates Korean financial organization to go out and seek opportunities outside actively.
But this is changing now, isn't it?
It's changing right now.
As a matter of fact, Woori Bank, the largest bank in Korea, the market leader, so to speak, in Korea, has quite some ambitious plans for the future, and you actually were the author of a case on Woori Bank and its ambitions.
Well, let me spend maybe 5 minutes to give our audience a little background on this Woori Bank and their innovation program, real briefly. So I actually jot down some notes to make my presentation a little more efficient. Woori in Korean means us, we, and they are the biggest bank in Korea, financial service organization in Korea based on asset, which is about $400 billion. So it's not a small bank. As you said, it's #1 bank in Korea, but 18th largest bank in Asia. Unlike Samsung, LG produce consumer gadget, they have been known as a global player. So Mr. Lee, who was the chairman of the financial group,
and who we will have on stage in a moment, right?
Yes. Right. He was determined to create world-class banking organization a few years ago, but the problem was Woori Bank was owned and is owned by Korean government up to 57%. So they have big shackle in terms of what can they do and how much resources they can spend on expansion and etc. etc. So he had a vision of creating a top 10 financial organization in Asia. So he implemented this innovation program called Wondu, launched in 2009 December.
Woori Bank. What is? I mean, it's called Wondu.
Wondu.
Wondu. Okay, one doing something.
One means everyone.
Chairman of Woori Bank, and Mr. Lee will be speaking in Korean, but Professor Jung will help us with the translation, right? Mr. Lee, when we met first, you were actually on a sort of sabbatical from the banking industry. You were actually the CEO of a Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra, right? But then you went back into banking and created this innovation program within Woori Bank. So can you tell me a little bit about your objectives for the program and what you wanted to achieve with it when you went back to Woori?
저는 일반 은행원으로 한 40년 전에 우리 은행에 조인을 해서 회장까지 처음에까지 올랐습니다. 한 40여 년간 우리 은행에서 근무를 했습니다. 제가 처음에 입사를 한 은행의 모습은 가만히 앉아 있어도 고객들이 와서 거래를 해줬기 때문에 은행 영업에는 전혀 지장이 없었습니다. 가만히 오는 고객들만 잘해줘도 이익이 나는 그러한 시스템으로 되어 있었습니다만 제가 회장으로 취임한 이후에는 이 금융산업이 어려울 거다. 앞으로 금융산업은 저성장 저수익 시대로 갈 것이다 라는 생각을 해서 2008년부터 이러한 저성장 저수익 시대의 생존을 어떻게 할 것이냐, 금융산업이 또 이러한 생존을 바탕으로 해서 어떻게 성장 전략을 가지고 갈 것이냐, 과거와 같은 성장 일변도의 금융산업은 이제는 존재하지 않을 거라는 생각을 해서 먼저 그룹에 저희 그룹을 잠깐 소개를 드리면은 약 26,000명 정도의 인플로이와 13개의 서브시리얼 컴퍼니 계열사를 가진 그런 회사입니다. 그래서 홀딩 컴퍼니의 혁신 전담부서를 먼저 만들어서 이 혁신 전담부서에서 전 임직원이 혁신 과제를 스스로 도출해내서 바텀업 방식으로 기업을 개선해 나가지 않으면은 생존하기 어렵다는 그런 생각을.
Could we hear the quick summary of
All right.
the chairman said?
He started almost 40 years working with Uri Bank from the right beginning of this history. And at the time, the banking industry in Korea was actually real easy to make money because all you need to do is just sitting in your office and customers are coming in and begging for money and loans. So that was a good old day. And he said that, well, with this global competition, the banking industry in Korea has changed toward low growth and low margin. So he realized after he became a chairman of the financial group, instead of waiting for customer to come in, he decided to actively seek customers by creating more value-added package to the customers. So one of the things that he initiated was, as I said, Wondu. Uri Financial Group is consisted of about 26,000 employees with 13 subsidiaries, and his Uri Bank is the only banking company in Korea with a standing alone innovation department, and that was part of his main initiative. With his initiative, Banker Magazine designated Uri Bank in 2008 as one of the top 5 banks which eliminated potential risk out of this financial crisis around the world. He strived to continue to be the world's top 50 financial organizations, and that was part of his speech as a chairman of the board.
And you know, there's always this element of competition, of course.
Mhm.
You're not alone. So, what did Wori do differently, or how do you view the Wori brand relative to other banks in Korea?
우리 뱅크가 다른 은행들에 비해서 어떤 것들을 차별하는
우리 은행은 2001년에 정부로부터 공적 자금을 받아서 이 공적 자금을 약 한 50% 정도는 민영화가 되었지만 50% 정도는 정부가 스테이크를 가지고 있기 때문에 성장 전략을 실행을 한다든지 또 의사결정에 있어서도 상당한 정부의 여러 가지 결정을 받아야 되기 때문에 상당히 그런 신속한 스피디한 기능을 할 수가 없어서 빨리 이 민영화를 해야 되겠다 생각을 해서 2009년부터 언론 또 예금보험공사 또 정부 이렇게 해서 한결과 약 16%의 불확실히 한 20억 불 정도의 민영화를 했습니다만 그 이후에도 세 차례나 걸친 이런 민영화 완전 민영화를 위한 노력을 했습니다만 유효 경쟁이 되지 못해서 완전한 민영화를 하지는 못했습니다. 따라서 우리 이 그룹이 타 금융 그룹과는 이러한 면에서 차별이 있기 때문에 혁신을 통한 성장 전략 또 낭비 요소 제거를 하지 않으면은 도저히 개대될 수 없다는 생각에서 그런 오늘도 혁신을
One of the reasons why he decided to implement this Won-do innovation program was Uri Financial Group was in part owned by Korean government and they control their resources. So instead of investing money and resources on system and process improvement, they actually didn't have much resources to play around. So one of his most important agenda after he became the CEO was to privatize this Uri Financial Group, which was owned by about 56%. So he began effort to convince government officials, Congress, FDIC, and media and customers for the last 10 years to rebuy shares of the equity of the financial group. So in 09 and 10, he made up about 16% of equity owned by the Korean government resold to the bank, which was about $2 billion. And after that, he tried to buy back the whole remaining equity from the Korean government 3 more times, but the Korean government refused to actually sell this because Uri Bank has been highly profitable and become really important source of government income.
Okay, great. I want to talk in a moment about the current situation going forward in terms of the future of the banking business. But since we've had a great case example here of innovation within a Korean bank, very much focused on doing it jointly, Won-do, as well as customer orientation, I would like to first invite to the stage another example of innovation or somebody who can share that example with us, and then we will get back to you going forward with the business. I'd like to... All right, Steve, before we get into banking, of course, what is very relevant in the context of this conference is that slogan of living, breathing Asia, right, that we have, the branding slogan, but you are more in the innovation business of the bank, right? So tell me about innovation at DBS.
Well, firstly, Bern, I barely recognized you in those shoes. Innovation at DBS, I think banking is undergoing some really dramatic transformation at the moment, and I think customer centricity is something that is in the verbiage of almost every bank today. And we're really transforming from being a service industry and a process transaction industry to an industry that creates value for customers. And
Sounds great. What does it mean?
What does it mean is that we're starting to combine knowledge and expertise in financial services with the products and services that we actually provide to customers. And that means that we look at, and one example at DBS, in our corporate banking, we've always looked at facilitating transactions for our corporate customers and using our balance sheet. Today, we've identified that there's something like 2.7 trillion in underutilized working capital across Asia within companies. So how can we now help our customers revolutionize their own businesses financially and create value for both parties?
I see, so basically helping them with their business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right. And have you been very successful with that approach?
Yeah, we're really starting to see the impact, and I mean, you can see that in our results here in Singapore. And we're engaging with levels of customers and international customers that years ago we couldn't even have a dialogue with.
Right, and getting back to this theme of living, breathing Asia as a whole, how far would your business reach? Where are you most successful with this?
We're incredibly focused in Asia. Our focus is on the primary Asian markets. And we have global linkages, of course, but really we're very focused heavily in full-service banking in Singapore and in Korea and increasingly in Indonesia, but also present in Taiwan, China, and Hong Kong.
So let me ask you the competitive question too, since you mentioned Korea, right?
No, Taiwan, China, and India.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
But we look to Korea as a fantastic market of innovation.
Okay, all right. And if you enter the Korean market, how would you differentiate yourself?
I think differentiation is always a matter of execution rather than necessarily just positioning per se. Korea is an incredibly innovative market, and since the financial crisis, you've seen the entire banking market in Korea completely pivot in a very innovative way. We actually had our board meeting in Korea just a few weeks ago, where we had a look at in depth at some of the activities that are happening in Korea.
And by financial crisis, you mean the recent one, not the one in 1997, right? I'm saying this because Korea as a country in lots of different industries became extremely innovative after 1997. But not the banking industry, as a matter of fact. So that's a relatively recent phenomenon.
Actually, it really began in '97. So
Okay.
they say that innovation, or the mother of all innovation is necessity, and definitely the crisis was the catalyst for that. I think the view that we're taking in DBS is more that the opportunity of innovation, and which is the father of innovation.
Okay, let's look towards the future, and I'd like to ask you the question. What are the major changes that are happening right now with consumer banking, for example, and what innovations can we expect going forward, and also changes in the behavior of consumers? Professor Jung, do you want to perhaps first take a well to
Korean
that question?
customers are probably some of the most active innovators as customers, but also innovation seekers. They are probably one of the most early adapters around the world in terms of new technologies, SNS. Korean customers are very picky about what they do, what they buy, what they invest. So Korean banking organizations try to diversify their business portfolios, business models, and try to actively encourage people to try out different techniques. So that's one of the reasons why not many international and global banking organizations are coming in Korea and not getting a kind of expected outcome they wanted to create. Korean customers are very pleased, very tough to please, and they continue to seek out new and bigger opportunities. There are not a lot of what they call customer loyalty among Korean customers. They are very opportunity seekers. So it will take years of experience and know-how to be able to capture Korean customers' heart and rationalities. That's probably one of the biggest challenges for many global companies coming in and facing a Korean market.
Okay, and I'd like to ask Chairman Lee, who just actually retired this year, right? So ex-Chairman Lee, the question about Korean consumers as well, especially young consumers, right? Social media, for example. What kinds of products and services are needed to reach that type of consumer?
예, 지금 정 교수께서 말씀하신 대로 지금 그 SNS라든가 소셜 이런 거에 따라서 크라우드 펀딩이라든지 크라우드 금융이라든지 이런 게 많이 확대될 가능성이 많기 때문에 금융 산업에 종사하는 사람들도 그런 부분에 많이 관심을 가지고 활동을 해야 주식 마켓에서 승리를 가질 수 있다고 생각합니다.
Well, he said that some of more innovative approaches coming up in Korean market is funding their opportunities through crowdfunding. That's been very active in Korean market, and a lot of companies now utilize SNS as a way to reach to the customer. Korean customers are actively engaging in this SNS-based marketing process, but also branch banking becomes rarer and rarer because a lot of Korean customers utilize internet banking services 24 hours, 7 days a week. So Korean financial organizations have some of the best and latest technologies in the internet banking technologies. So that's another trend. CSR becomes very important part of agenda because Korean customers are looking for financial organizations that are doing something good for the society, even during the tough time and economic crisis.
So I think that's a major trend, isn't it? In fact, I'd like a show of hands from the audience. How many of you have been to a bank branch over the last 4 weeks And we are not counting an ATM machine, right? We do that all the time. How many of you have been to a bank to do some banking services over the last 4 weeks? Raise your hand. That's not many. That's not many at all. So I guess that we are seeing a sea change, really. Right? I'd like to also take questions from you in the audience in a moment, so please be ready with your questions. But before we take your questions, I'd like to ask Steve that issue too. Are you observing the same trend in terms of branches and more banking, of course, happening online 24/7? And that is the standard now, that's the expectation. So as a result, we want, as consumers, to see innovations with respect to new media.
Yeah, absolutely. Banking is no longer something, somewhere you go, it's just something you do. And our focus is really on the context of banking. How can we be very contextual to the customer? So how can we be there when you need us anytime, anywhere? And that's a real shift in thinking, because it's no longer something that's really dedicated. I set this time aside for banking. That's no longer the case. People are very dynamic in the way that they engage, and we're rapidly adapting our services to be there within that context.
It requires different kinds of services, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when you're in a branch, I mean, there's a lot of service training for the interaction with the customer, of course, right? But when you're doing this online, part of the services have to have a working website that is easy to navigate, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually that's a good point. As an organization, we're very heavily focused on design now, which you would think would be highly unusual for a bank just a few years ago.
Yes.
So we're actually building design capabilities within the bank that really look at that whole engagement experience from the customer. And I think what we notice consistently from customers is the value that's placed on simplicity. And for an industry that's highly invested in complexity, that's a real mind shift.
You really talk like a designer, because they always talk about design thinking, about simplicity, about customer friendliness, and I guess these are new buzzwords now in the banking business.
They're not just buzzwords. There's something that we're investing very heavily in, and I think there's not a customer here that comes into any day saying, make my day more complex. Everyone wants that burden removed, and so we're actively looking at it. So I'll give you a simple example, which I found quite amusing at DBS. Our mortgage form, the first question is, are you Mr., Mrs. or Ms.? And our second question was, are you male or female? So it doesn't take a lot to work out how we can simplify things for customers, because we're no longer somewhere where we require you to fulfill our standard. We're looking at how do we create value for you in the simplest way possible.
Very good. Let's take some questions from the audience. Please identify yourself and let us...
Studying this space, we actually held a Sequoia Portfolio Day where we brought in founders of Square, Evernote, WhatsApp, etc., to really understand what's driving the entrepreneurial mindset today. That crowdfunding, and not just crowdfunding, but also P2P lending is exploding. So in China, bank share of lending dropped from 92% to under 60%. So banks are increasingly working hard to engage customers and support businesses in different ways. So it's very much something that we're aware of and focused on and looking for new solutions to address.
Okay. Can we also have Boris' perspective on that?
미은행에서 벤처 기업들, 인큐베이터하는 벤처 기업들에 대한 펀딩 이런 걸 많이 해봤고 상당 부분 그에서 성공도 했습니다.
Well, Uri Bank, which is in part owned by the Korean government, so they are very interested in helping startup company secure right type of funding. So they have a different department seeking actively out for new and startup companies, and they have an internal mechanism where if you are a founder of new business, you can go to their website and try to engage this process, and appropriate personnel from the bank will contact the venture company and try to understand their needs, and that's how they can get started. Korean government also create website where people with money, organizations like financial service companies can find people or organization who are in need of more fundings. So Korean government has been trying to play like a matchmaker. So Korean government give a lot of pressure to many financial organizations to come up with their own version of funding type of activities. So it's a part of the Korean government whole agenda. So financial organizations need to be in compliance with this Korean government initiative. So that's been very active over the last 4 to 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe.
I think I'll address the viability question first. It is viable, and I think technology gives us new ways to reach consumers that we couldn't dream of before with very expensive infrastructure and face-to-face relationships that were the core of banking. So I think there are new opportunities, and it is a very serious segment. I mean, we serve people. I mean, banking is a people business, and we don't discriminate on the basis of socioeconomic other than in the management of risk. And what we've seen, and it's been proven in markets in microfinance, is that risk can be managed really effectively. And one of the elements of risk, or one of the biggest costs in microfinance, is actually the cost to serve. And technology addresses that cost to serve. So it's definitely something that's on our radar, and part of our innovation focus is to look at how we reach markets that we couldn't reach before within DBS, because we're very active in many of the markets that have huge segments of population within that demographic.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Let's take one last.
제가 말을 잘못하면은 나중에 또 5년 후에 저한테 책임이 돌아오기 때문에 지금 한국의 자본시장, 소위 주식시장 많이 저평가되어 있다는 걸로 인식들을 하고 있습니다. 저희 금융그룹만 해도 PBR 한 0.5 정도, 또 한국의 연간한 특별한 삼성그룹이라든지 현대그룹, 차그룹이라든지 이런 걸 몇 개 빼고는 아주 다 저평가가 되어 있기 때문에 앞으로 펀딩 할 수 있는 좋은 기회가 아닌가 그렇게 생각을 합니다.
He said that he need to be real careful about what kind of advice to give because he doesn't want to take blame after 5 years. But he said that other than automotive and IT industries, every other sector in Korean market tend to be highly undervalued. For example, Uri Bank has only 0.5 PBR, which is kind of ridiculous. So it's really great timing for somebody like you to come in and try. And this could be a really gold mine because Korean stock market has been highly undervalued. I mean, a lot of foreigners tend to recognize only Hyundai Motor, Samsung Electronic, but these are not everything that we have to offer. So if you continue to look for those industries and companies with particularly low PBR ratio, then it will be a relatively interesting and profitable investment you can enjoy.
Well, thank you very much for this excellent advice.